Okay, good afternoon and welcome everyone to this final Grad Ready event. This is the Charting Your Path Alumni Career Panel. I'm excited to be with you this afternoon. We have a great panel in store for you, and I'm happy to welcome you to this webinar. So this event is brought to you actually by 3 different departments on our campus. It's a collaboration between Alumni Relations, the GSPA, and the Center for Career Action. Alumni Relations actually as of September is 220,000 people strong. So it's a really big network, and it's a really great opportunity for students to connect, to learn from alumni, and to network and join events. So I encourage you to look into all the opportunities. Since this is our final Grad Ready event, wrapping up a series of events that started in the summer, we will be looking forward to collecting your feedback at the end. There will be a survey sent to everyone at the end, and if you participate in that survey, your name will be put into a draw and you can win a prize of Watt card money. So we look forward to your participation as an audience, and I'll share with you how today is going to run in a minute. You'll notice that your chat is on. If you have any technical issues, my colleague Rachel from the GSPA is in the audience, and you can ask any support questions if you have tech issues, and the question and answers, if any questions come up throughout the panel, you can share in the Q&A. So my name is Kira Brushka. I use the pronouns she and her, and I'm one of the graduate career advisors at the Center for Career Action. I love moderating panels like this because I love hearing people's career stories. That's really why I'm in career counseling, and I have the pleasure of working with lots of grad students on campus, and it's always really great to hear what happens after graduation. And so this is why these panels are so interesting to me. So let me just share with you a little bit before we get started, some key things that are really important for me to acknowledge as we begin today. First and foremost, I respectfully acknowledge that I live and work on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Neutral peoples. And I know that many of you in the audience are tuning in from all different parts of maybe Canada or the world even, and I encourage you to check out what territory you are living on, and for me, what this land acknowledgement means personally, and when I acknowledge where I live. And for me, it's a deep respect for the environment, for the place that I live, and taking care of it and nurturing it and advocating for environmental protection. That's a big part of this land acknowledgement for me. I'd also like to acknowledge that our panelists are sharing some really personal stories with us today, and they've taken time out of their busy schedules. And I want to make sure we create a safe environment for them to share their stories. And my main rule of thumb to create a safe space for everyone is just an environment of respect. So when you are sharing questions, asking questions on the Q&A, I just ask that you do that in a respectful manner so that everyone feels comfortable sharing and asking questions and sharing part of their story. So this is how our agenda will look. I'm going to do a little bit of talking for a little wee while and share with you how the Center for Career Action can support you as a PhD student in your career planning. Just some brief ideas on support and tips for your career planning. And then I'll introduce our panelists. And I have some questions prepared for the panelists. And then I also have the questions you've submitted in advance. So I will be reading those and asking the panelists those, as well as anything that comes in live. So you can use the Q&A feature here on Zoom to ask any questions that pop up that you didn't think to ask, or that maybe come up as you hear someone's career story. So that's how that will work. And if you have any tech issues, as mentioned, you can use the chat, and my colleague Rachel from the GSPA will be able to support. This is being recorded, so if you miss something, if your internet cuts out, if you have to leave partway through, you will be emailed a recording at the end, and you'll have that in your inbox. Or you can also find it on the GSPA YouTube channel later on. So there will be access if you feel you missed something, want to review something again, or your internet cuts out. Okay, so let me share with you a little bit about the department I work for, the Center for Career Action. We serve everyone on campus at Waterloo, and we're doing that all virtually right now. So we support undergrad students, the regular and the co-op stream. We support master's and PhD students and the postdocs on campus. We support all alumni, and we also help employees, including faculty, all staff and faculty. And what do we help them with? We help with all kinds of things, including job search strategies, such as networking, LinkedIn profiles. We help people with resumes, CVs, cover letters, interview prep. We do a lot of interview coaching, career exploration, and grad school prep. And how do we do that? We support people through one-on-one appointments. We also have all of those appointments are virtual right now through our Waterloo Works platform, or through Zoom if people prefer, or telephone. And we're connecting with people all across the globe right now virtually for these appointments. We do drop-ins every day as well. And we have a number of workshops that we have available asynchronously and also live, and a number of online resources to help people with career and employment goals. So lots of ways that we support, and in particular for master's, PhD students, and postdocs, there are 2 career advisors at the Center for Career Action. So I'm Kira, as I mentioned before, and my colleague Phil is the other graduate career advisor. And so all of the grad-focused supports, workshops, online resources, appointments, drop-ins, those are all provided by Phil and me. And we look forward to helping you in any way we can with your career and employment goals. So a few little things about the career planning process. You're going to hear some career stories today, and you might kind of sort of hear the different aspects of the cycle and the process that actually kind of goes into coming up with a career plan. But I thought it'd be helpful to share some of this. You might all be at different stages in this process, but very often career planning starts with a little bit of self-reflection. And knowing yourself is really key to making a good plan. And once you have a sense of yourself and what you want, what's important to you, it's then easier to identify career ideas and opportunities that might suit that. And usually the next stage is connecting with people in those areas and conducting research, reading about those opportunities, and maybe then testing out your hypothesis and seeing, is this a good fit for me, through doing volunteer work or part-time job or something to test out these options. And then very often people land right back at self-reflection going, was that the right fit? Is this still the right thing for me? And so on and so forth. In your lifetime, you will probably cycle through this process multiple times as you get a new job, or even as a project changes in your workplace, or you have a new manager. You may cycle through this process multiple times in your career, in your lifespan, and that would be absolutely normal. So I think it's important to kind of recognize that it is cyclical and you could be anywhere in this cycle, but that it's there's never a final destination. You'll see if you talk to people about their career stories that very often these things evolve over time, and you'll be cycling through the self-reflection and identifying ideas and researching them frequently, probably in your lifetime. When we talk about the self-assessment and the self-reflection, really what we're looking at are these factors. In career planning, it's really important to reflect on what are your values, what matters to you, what's important to you, what's important to you, what gives you purpose and meaning. We also look at skills. What are you good at as a grad student in your PhD? What skills are you developing? What are you good at? But more importantly, which of those skills do you enjoy using? Which ones are fun for you to use? Which ones energize you? And there might be some skills you've gained from outside of your PhD that you'd like to use as well. And that's really important to reflect on. For personality factors, this can be really helpful to think about, because personality can help identify a work environment that might be a good fit for you. And interests, most of us want to be interested and care about what we're doing. So reflecting on what grabs your attention, what do you care about, what interests do you have, can also be really important in deciding on a career area. External factors also impact our career decision making, and it's important to factor those into the plan as well. Factors like what's happening in the labor market. Currently, we're living through a pandemic that has impacted certain jobs, and so those are some factors that obviously people consider when they're making a career plan. For many grad students, I know that the part of the factor is where they want to live, what city, what country. Do you have family that you need to live close with, or family that would be making a move with you if you're moving to a new location? So these are all factors that also go into career planning. And so all of these things are helpful to think about when you're reflecting on who you are and what you want. These are some tips on just ways that you can start reflecting on that wheel and thinking a little bit about that. throughout your PhD, I encourage you to start identifying interests and developing skills early on through a number of ways. Attending this event is a great way of starting to reflect on your own interests. As you hear other people's stories, it will maybe make you think about your own situation, your own story. And attending other workshops that are professional development opportunities on campus can be really great for developing skills, identifying those skills, figuring out those interests. So get involved on campus or off campus in your community. I know for many of you that might be a different community right now, might not be in Waterloo, but any interests that you can develop through getting involved can be a really great way to expand skills and get to know yourself a little better. When you're doing research on career opportunities and you're exploring those potential areas that might fit you, how can you do that? A few ways. I encourage you to start collecting job postings, even if you're not on the job market. Look and see what is happening in those job postings. What are some skill sets or qualifications that come up over and over again in the areas that you're interested in? Keep track of the companies, the organizations, the institutions that interest you, and start to connect with alumni, faculty, and employers through networking events or through self-directed informational interviews or coffee chats that you can do virtually. So start thinking about ways to research opportunities well in advance to get some ideas. And then start thinking about what's important to you through asking yourself these questions. What problems do you like to solve? What challenges do you care about? What motivates you? And if you need some help sort of thinking about these pieces, I encourage you to reach out and book an appointment for a one-on-one career planning session to help explore these things. We also have a number of self-assessments available online to help you reflect on all these things that I've brought up on careerhub.uwaterloo.ca. There is in the career decision-making section a number, there's a whole section on career self-assessment and self-directed activities that you can do to think about these things as well. I'd like to share a little bit of an image with people who are visual learners who want to kind of think about career paths with a PhD. And this is the sort of the last image I'll share with you before introducing our panelists. When you're thinking about career paths, if you like to think in categories, this could be useful. So for some of you, you might be studying a very specific area. You have expertise in a very specific area. I call that your subject area. So let's say you're studying renewable energy or you're studying wind turbines. So that's your subject area. You're an expert in that subject. And we're all quite familiar probably with the career path of going into academia. You have a lot of faculty around you. You probably see what that looks like working in your area of expertise in academia as a faculty member. So that's the sort of academic quadrant here. But there is maybe an opportunity to work in the same subject matter, but maybe in a different setting. So instead of in the university setting, working in research or publishing or consultancy, doing research on that subject matter of wind turbines, for example, for an organization, for government, or for consulting, for environmental consulting firm, for example. So same subject, but different sector. So those are some ways of thinking about the career, same subject matter and sector. There's also, the sector of academia, but different subject matter. So I have a number of colleagues who have a PhD who are working at the Center for Career Action and Career Advising. I know some people at the Writing and Communication Center, the Research Office, Center for Teaching Excellence. Those are all roles we would call alternative academic roles that are different subject matter from maybe what you researched, but the setting, the sector is the same, academic setting. And then there's this final quadrant here, which I would say is maybe the more unknown one for most grad students that I meet. A different sector, different subject matter, working in industry in an area that is outside of your area of research and also outside of the environment, the sector you're in right now, which is academic, which is education. And again, reaching out to people, networking, researching, this can help clarify what could those possibilities look like. And so I'm excited to introduce our panelists now, because you will hear some career stories that will help you think maybe through some of these quadrants, and some of you, as you hear their stories, I'm sure you'll hear how they engaged in the process that I just shared with you. I think everyone's story will be unique, and we can learn from that. So without further ado, Here's our contact info that, if you want to connect with the Center for Career Action for support on all this information, our Career Hub and our homepage and our Waterloo Works to book appointments. And I'll introduce our panelists now. I'm sure you're eager to meet them all. I'd like to welcome, in the order that they'll be introducing themselves, Dr. Roseanne Abdullah. Roseanne completed a BA, MA, and PhD in French Studies at Waterloo. So is very familiar with the Waterloo community and is currently a content marketing manager of education at D2L. And there's some contact information there for Roseanne. And then our second panelist who will be speaking will be Dr. Jason Diegland. I'd like to welcome Jason as well. Jason did his master's and PhD at Waterloo in systems design engineering. And currently Jason is a CEO at Blue Lions Lab, as well as an industrial postdoctoral fellow at Waterloo. And then our third panelist is Dr. Noreen Manji. And Noorin has a PhD in sociology from Waterloo and is the co-founder of Love of Language, as well as a Sessional professor at Waterloo. So welcome to our three panelists. Thank you to all three of you for spending some time with us this afternoon. Looking forward to chatting with you a little more about your career stories and your transitions from grad school to all the cool things you're up to right now. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we can see our panelists better. And just again, to remind the audience, in case people have joined a little later, that this is being recorded. So if you missed anything at the beginning, the recording will be emailed to you, and as well as the slide. I'm going to stop sharing it right now. Okay, so welcome. Thank you everyone for being here. And I mentioned I introduced everyone in the order that they'd be speaking. And as I explained earlier, I have some questions that I prepared for the panelists, and then I'll go to the questions that the audience submitted. But my very first question is very broad. I'd just love to hear your career story. So if you could please share your career story and how you transitioned from grad studies to where you are now. We'll get a sense from all of our panelists with that question, and then I'll go into more specific questions. So Roseanne, would you like to start?
Yes, definitely. Hi, thank you, Kira, for the introduction. So a little bit about my career story. Kira mentioned that I do have 3 of my degrees from University of Waterloo. So I started off doing my BA at UW. I actually was originally a psychology major. Because I've just always wanted to major in psychology. I still love the subject. And then I ended up switching into French studies. About partway through, I decided that I wanted to go into teaching. So I applied for Teachers College. So I also have my B.Ed from Western. And my B.Ed is in intermediate, senior, French, and English. So I've got French as my first teachable, English is my second one. And I taught grade 9 French for a little bit right out of my B.Ed. That was sort of where I thought I was going. And through that process of teaching, as you can imagine, teaching grade 9 French, not the most simple task to do. And I could just kind of feel that I liked teaching, but there was something about it that wasn't 100% fulfilling. I wasn't truly happy doing that. So without really reflecting too much, I ended up just jumping back in to do my master's in French studies again at UW. I was like, I already know the department, I'm familiar with it, I liked it. And a master's is pretty versatile. Even if I did go back to teaching, it would still kind of be okay. So I did my master's. I loved my master's. Probably my favorite degree, I would say, was doing my master's. I mean, that's such a nerdy thing to say, that you have a favorite degree. So I loved doing my master's. I felt more at home, but I still wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. So actually, after my master's, I took a year and I was working in a bilingual administrative role. And for that, I would say, kind of, it makes you think, don't be afraid to step away from school. I feel like stepping away from school, grad school in particular, and not going straight into my PhD is what gave me the idea to kind of want to do my PhD and appreciate it more. I think if I had gone straight from my master's into my PhD, I might not have enjoyed it as much. So I wasn't really happy in my admin role. So then I went back and did my PhD, which was in French studies, as Kira mentioned. Finished that in 2018, and I am currently working at D2L I've had 2 roles there. They're located in Kitchener. Most of you are probably familiar with the Learn platform. I started off as a bilingual trainer, so I was training our different clients who are universities, colleges, corporate, and K-12 and government on how to use the platform, both in French and in English. So I was able to tie in some of my education skills and the bilingual piece. And then I recently started also at D2L as a content marketing manager. So again, completely different. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but I'm in marketing now and still in the education field, putting a little more of the writing into practice as opposed to the teaching part. So that is where I currently am at now.
Great. Thank you, Roseanne. That was a very quick overview of many years of that's really cool. I love how you just described yourself as a kind of nerdy for having a favorite degree. Hey, why not? Yeah. But that's great. We look forward to hearing a little more about what you're doing through some of the other questions, because I'm sure people are curious what, what that role looks like day to day. So looking forward to hearing more through the other questions. I think, Jason, you are our second panelist. Are you ready to share your career story?
Yeah, let's do this.
Okay.
Yeah, well, first off, thanks for the great intro. I guess I'm still not being used to being called a doctor. That was like, when you said my name, I was like, oh, I guess I am. So, yeah, I guess I'll kind of start from the beginning, not starting from the end. You also talked about self-assessments, and that was actually part of my journey as well. So, well, after high school, I'm going to briefly go through my high school, master's, and undergrad. I was just like, I'm not going to do post-secondary school. I want to get a job. I want to make some money. That whole university life is not for me. So I actually ended up framing in construction, and I did that for around 2 to 3 years. And after a couple of winters, I quickly realized that my body couldn't take that. Respect to the people who can do that type of work. So I actually did a self-assessment, and at the top of the list was aerospace engineer. And I was like, sure, let's do that. So I applied to the program, electrical engineering, because there was no aerospace program. I got in after some work, and I was still planning on getting the job, but I did some co-ops during my undergrad, and those really helped me in determining that I liked research. I did a lot of R&D in my undergrad. So opposed to getting the job, I actually ended up coming to Waterloo to do my master's in systems design in the vision and image processing group. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. But I found it was very kind of theoretical, very computer science, and not very practical based. And I wanted to do something around startups. And so at the end of my master's, I was like, well, I'll go join a startup. That was kind of my plan. My academic supervisor actually suggested I apply to the PhD NSERC. And I got it. Like, I did not expect it, and I'm still grateful that that was given to me. And so I had an opportunity to do a PhD, and I was like, well, I can't let this go. I was like, this is a one in a lifetime chance. This is not going to come again. And so I kind of had to do some self-reflection on what I wanted to do for my PhD. And I had an undergrad in electrical engineering, a bunch of co-op experience with cameras, a master's in computer vision. And the topic I chose was actually water quality. It was kind of like water is fundamental to who we are. We drink it, we brush our teeth, we use it for cooking. And I learned about like these harmful organisms called algae that were threatening this and poisoning our water. And then what really got me is I started talking to biologists, and they would take these water samples, put it under a microscope, and by eye look and identify all these organisms. So I thought, well, I can probably attempt to make their lives a little easier and automate some of that process. So really the goal of my PhD was to explore using artificial intelligence to automate some of this tedious work for these biologists, as well as look for any startup opportunities along the way, since I was really motivated to explore the startup world. And about a year into my PhD, there was a competition, a hackathon called Aqua Hacking. And they had a problem statement about harmful organisms on Lake Erie. And I was like, well, that's perfect. So I joined that, and that was a 5-month competition. And the team that I was on, we actually ended up winning the competition, which I also didn't expect. And so we used that money to incorporate a company, which is Blue Line Labs. And that really opened the door to me being like, okay, I'm going to explore my research seriously as an entrepreneur. So I started attending more pitch competitions in Canada, the US. I even got to go to China, which was a really great experience. I started connecting with drinking water utilities in Ontario, really trying to apply my research. And so I was super gung-ho on starting this company. And as I ended my PhD, I kind of realized that we had some money from these pitch competitions, but not enough to pay anyone, and let alone pay myself. And so I learned of the MyTax program, and MyTax is great. And they have an industrial postdoc, and that's exactly my position now. So I'm still taking my PhD research, still doing research around that, but really having an emphasis on what's a commercial opportunity here. Yeah, so that's the journey.
Really cool. And I'm seeing a trend, both Roseanne and Jason, kind of like it's trying things out that help narrow down like, yeah, this is what I think I want to do next. It's a lot of a trial and error kind of and letting experiences just kind of come at you. It sounds like you just took some opportunities you didn't think would happen, but hey, this is a once in a lifetime chance. I'm going to do it. Yeah,
totally.
Really
I couldn't have planned it if I tried.
In career theory, we call it planned happenstance, because you kind of have to put yourself in the right place to make some of those things happen. But yeah, that's cool. Well, let's hear from our third panelist. Noreen, would you like to share your career story with us?
Absolutely. Thank you for the introduction, and thanks for sharing these stories. I'm so interested in what everyone else has been doing. I'm like, wow, I can't believe how different everybody's journey is, even though we're on the same sort of academic path to get there, but then we end up in so many different places. I've always loved school. School's been my jam. I was in the IB program in high school. I loved it. I pursued my Bachelor of Arts at McMaster and finished my master's there as well, and went straight through to my PhD. And I found that being in school was just I love this academic bubble. It's its own little universe that's different than the working world. And of course, I had friends that were involved in industry and in business early on in their careers. And the moment came where I contemplated, do I really want to push through more years of school, potentially accumulating more OSAP debt and all that other stuff that comes with that. But the desire to learn was larger for me than the desire to make money or to rush to that end point. So I loved the idea of staying in school, and I'm sure everyone here is to some degree on that trajectory, because why else are we here? So the idea of school really appealed to me, and staying in it for so long. And I was lucky enough to have lots of experiences along the way, just like you all of you guys have described, about sort of testing what worked best for me. And I knew that academia, especially at the time that I was starting my journey, was very sort of mediated between research and teaching. That was sort of the kind of environment that I had heard about being central to the academic experience. So I had chances to do research for organizations like Cancer Care Ontario, Ontario Tobacco Research Unit, and all these great organizations. But I quickly realized that research wasn't really, I enjoy it, but it wasn't something that I was truly passionate about. And as I had the chance to do things like TA-ships and other things that I'm hoping to talk to you more about as we go through this panel, I realized teaching is where I belong. I love connecting with students. I love hearing their journeys. And the thing that I love most perhaps about teaching is that you're always learning, even if you're teaching. The students teach you stuff. As you put together a course, you're learning how to do something new. So that really appealed to me, that being part of that teaching environment would always allow me a chance to grow as a learner myself. So basically, after I finished high school, I did the one-year master's, and then I came to Waterloo, and I had every intention of finishing my PhD in the magical 4 years, but quickly realized by year 3 that just wasn't going to happen. And then, I kind of faced that wall of, okay, my funding is about to run out, but I want to finish this degree. What do I do? And for years, I had been tutoring privately, one-on-one, just as a side gig to make a little bit of extra money and help students along the way. And fortuitous timing, or the fates be what they may, I don't know what to call it, but the kind of intersection aligned perfectly, where as I was trying to contemplate what do I do to kind of sustain myself financially going through the academic journey, I had accumulated a wait list basically from tutoring. Like there were students that wanted to see me one-on-one, but I just like couldn't fit them into my schedule. And so this is the point at which I partnered up with my business partner, and we started our own program called Love of Language. We started it in 2013, and it's a curriculum I designed based on everything I wish someone had told me when I was these kids' age, like about how to write, how to public speak, how to put your ideas together, how to do analysis, and then how to kind of extend that to other skills like, writing your resume and CV, getting ready for job interviews, and the things that, we don't really, it's not a sort of universal experience for all students in grades 5 to 12. That's the target group for our program. So we started that program in 2013, and it's just flourished. And in our first year we had one class with like 9-10 students. I was the only instructor, and here we are now 7 years later. We have 11 classes, 5 other instructors. We've helped hundreds of students, and it's like one of the things that I'm most proud about in my career, because not only have I been able to pursue my dream of teaching at the university level, which is the thing that I'm most passionate about, but I've been able to take those years of school and all the academic abilities that I accumulated and help now a whole new generation of students get ready for what's coming next for them. And perhaps the thing that pushed me most to kind of put the Love of Language program into place was realizing as a university TA and instructor eventually that you see students and they're writing on their exams and their assignments, and sometimes I'm shocked at, that they don't know how to write as well as you would expect them to at in a second, third year, fourth year level. So my goal when I'm teaching these younger students is to say to them, don't be one of those kids, right? You want to be ready for that post-secondary education, and you want to have the excellent communication skills to communicate orally and in a written form as well. So, that was sort of my journey. And luckily enough, I was able to start off my university teaching career path while I was still doing my degree. So I didn't have the big break that Roseanne and Jason kind of, described about taking a moment away from school. I've just been here the whole time. So like I started teaching, courses, I should say, in the social department in 2016, about 2 years before I finished my PhD. And I've just sort of taken to it like a fish in water. Like I love it. I love teaching at the university level, and I feel like it's my calling, and I get great feedback about it. So I'm excited that I've found a path that I'm excited to wake up in the morning and go to work. And what else can we ask for in this life? So I'll hand it off back to you guys. I have more stuff to share, but we'll chat about it as we go.
That's great. Yeah, I love that expression, finding your jam, right? I mean, and I think there's a lot of pressure on people to find your jam and that one passion. And it sounds like you've found it, Noreen. And then, I think it's a good way to describe it, but sometimes people have lots of jams, right? And I'm also kind of hearing, obviously some of our panelists are dabbling in different areas, which is really cool too, that, you can do multiple things when you graduate. It doesn't have to be one thing. So thanks for sharing those stories and setting us off on, in this panel with that background information. My next question is a little bit more specific. It's about how you're using your skills or whatever you learned in grad school in your current role. So I know some of you have multiple roles, but if you can kind of share a little bit how you've transferred those skills. And we're going to change the order this time. So I think we'll start with Noreen and go backwards this time with this question. So how are you using your skills or what you learned in grad school currently?
That's a great question. I almost don't know where to start with it, because it's so like minute and micro and macro level. The obvious skills that I'm using are my communication skills. Like as you go through the academic and journey, you're going to write how many papers, present on, how many things, and talk to different people. And so I've taken all those skills and sort of applied them to the curriculum I developed for Love of Language. And that's one of the things that I'm most proud about, sort of for my business specifically. And then the other half of that for the university teaching is, as a fresh graduate, someone who just graduated just 2 years ago, I've really tried to internalize the things that I thought worked well on my academic journey on the receiving end, right? As a student, right? I was very sort of conscious of the fact that I want to be teaching at the university level. So I kind of became, and as a sociologist, I suppose this is just my inner nature, I became very sort of discerning about what did I enjoy on my academic journey? Which are the profs that stood out the most? Which are the courses that changed me the most? And what was it about those courses that affected me in this way? And so now being on the other end of that spectrum and delivering courses, I've really taken that into my heart, basically, to say, like, I want to connect with students. I want them to be excited to come to my class, or in this pandemic year to watch my lectures online. I want them to enjoy it. And so I really try to go above and beyond in my course planning and how I interact with students, keeping in mind what my experience was as a student. So that's one of the most direct ways I've taken what I've learned as a student and applied it to my role as a university prof. And the feedback I get from students lets me know that something is working well. And the other thing is that I try to always remain open to the feedback that I'm getting, both from students, from peers, from colleagues, and everywhere, because I recognize that it's like this journey of growing and learning. So I'm always kind of open to the feedback and moving forward. So I guess the two biggest skills are my communication and that aspect of like what works course design wise for students.
Great, thank you. Thanks for sharing, Noreen. Jason, do you want to go next on that question?
Sure, I'd love to. And Noorin, I love your passion. It's really inspiring. And actually, like for me, like I get super excited when you're talking about love of language, because entering my master's, well, like I was that guy in second and third year who couldn't write at all. And when I started my master's, my supervisor was also like, oh, wow, this guy doesn't know how to write. And I would say that was probably one of the biggest things that I learned doing a master's and PhD. Just having to write a paper and like writing a thesis, like that was for me so intimidating, and having to take the initiative on that. And so I would say now that I've learned, I would say I'm a decent writer. I don't still consider myself a great writer. So Noorin, I can maybe still benefit from your program, but I would say that that's one skill that I didn't realize that was limiting me in my communication ability. And like I write all the time now for my postdoc and as an entrepreneur, as a CEO. Like I'm preparing documents, grant proposals. Like it's so much writing, and I'm glad that my master's and PhD forced me to do that. So yeah, if Noorin, the kids you're helping, I wish I was one of those, because I would have saved me a lot of heartache, right? Yeah, the other thing is also related to communication. It's just public speaking. Like I participated in the 3-minute thesis. Like I was part of these pitch competitions and these hackathons. I was never a confident speaker growing up. I was really shy, always kept to myself. And getting on stage and speaking to a lot of people, like it still intimidates me, but I can do it now, and it's a really, really valuable skill. And really, like, so really what my master's and PhD taught me was like to take abstract ideas, distill them down to their fundamentals, internalize them, and communicate that back. And like some people even argue that your research isn't even valid if you can't communicate it. Like, so, and I think that's a valid point. And so that's for me what I think one of the biggest things that I took away, that I didn't plan on like being like, this is the skill I'm going to develop. It just kind of forced me to learn that. So
that's great. Thanks for sharing. I think also this is like something important to note, is that skills are not perfect. Skills develop over time. So I think this is really neat also to hear that, these are the skills that you honed as a grad student. They got better over time from master's to now postdoc. Like they're not perfect. We aren't born with skills, right? They have to progress and develop over time. So thanks for pointing that out too, Jason. That's helpful. Roseanne, would you like to answer this question now?
Definitely. So I think that the conversation around skills, I've always found it quite interesting, because I think even growing up, I've always felt like sort of Jane of all trades, master of none. Like I like languages, I like writing, I like public speaking. And then if you look at my credentials, I studied education, I studied French, I studied psychology, I studied literature. So, I think at one point, my mom was a little bit like, okay, wait, what are you doing here? But then when I kind of look at where I've ended up and sort of try to take stock of those degrees and those skills, it's actually quite interesting how many of them are transferable. So if we're talking about, from a concrete level, okay, so education wise, I did work as a trainer at D2L. So I was definitely using a lot of the adult learning principles in that, using my French as well at D2L, using some of my psychology knowledge for training to be able to cater to the client, and then also in marketing to be able to read the audience. But in marketing, today I'm using my writing skills, my creativity as well. I think something that I learned towards the end of my PhD is that it's really important to sit down and ask yourself, okay, what skills am I actually using here that are transferable? And Jason touched on this a little bit, but not just saying, okay, I can read journal articles and write reports on them, but what are you actually doing? So he talked about taking abstract ideas and communicating them back. If you put that on a resume, everyone's going to want someone who can do that, right? So for me, marketing, ability to conduct research, draw out the most important relevant piece of evidence based on the requested messaging, and then I'm crafting pieces that are going to appeal to diverse audiences. So when we talk about writing, I'd never thought that I was going into a career in writing, but as Jason mentioned, you're writing your thesis, you're writing journal articles. We are pretty much in a career that involves writing, and I'm in marketing, but it is a ton of writing because I'm the content manager. So I'm responsible for, I do blog posts, we do ebooks, guides, video scripts, things like that. And it was quite funny because the other day my manager, she presented me this idea of how she wants to design our content moving forward, and it's called a messaging house in corporate. And she's like, so there's this umbrella statement with core content, and then there's this derivative content that links back to the umbrella statement. I was like, okay, so this is like a 5-paragraph essay, and it's like a thesis. She's like, I mean, I guess so. And they were like, this was monumental. They're going crazy for it. So I think it all really ties back. And what's interesting, one of our current themes is because we do cater to higher education as well at our company, the idea of future skills and really looking at the gap that exists between what students are learning and what skills they're going to need in the workforce. So I think some of this work that we're talking about and dissecting your skills can actually help to bridge the gap, but also to kind of fill in, maybe it's not so much of a gap as sort of a mindset change. You do have a lot of those skills already. You're just not really necessarily aware of how to market them. So it's all about marketing in the end, basically. So yeah, I think it's really cool for me to look back and just be like, oh, I'm using a little bit from this degree. I'm using this from this degree. I'm using this from, the other degrees. So I think it's super interesting.
Yeah, that's such a great point. Great points, Roseanne, that it's often about that, maybe even sitting down and reflecting about what are those transferable skills, and then learning how to speak about them in a language that connects with your audience. So whether you're pitching an idea for a business and the audience is investors, or whether you're in a marketing department and you're talking to your boss, your manager about ideas, right? It's all shifting that language and kind of learning different ways of expressing our skills to the audience that is listening. And yeah, that's great. Thank you all. That's really neat. Some great stories there about how you're applying what you've learned in grad school. I'm going to shift a little bit about like in your career story, looking at maybe how you navigated some challenging times. So I'm wondering, what were some of the challenges that you encountered while you were career planning or job searching, and how did you overcome these? So I know career planning, job searching, they're two different things, but maybe whichever comes to your mind that you feel comfortable sharing. And maybe since Roseanne and Noorin have been the first speaker for other questions, maybe we'll get Jason to answer this one first, if that's okay. Does that sound all right, Jason?
Yeah, I'm happy to.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's a hard one. I guess I'll focus mine just on my PhD because there was quite the journey going from my high school to undergrad to master's. But I guess in my PhD, the first hurdle was actually deciding what my thesis was going to be on. And I guess this is actually a privileged problem to have, because I know a lot of PhD students don't even get to choose their topic. But there was this pressure on me to be like, well, I only got this one chance, and what am I going to do? I actually initially chose imaging art. Like, I had a friend who worked at the art gallery in Toronto, and they were doing these hyperspectral imaging techniques. And I got super excited about that because, like, from a science engineering standpoint, I was geeking out about all the wavelengths and everything. And I pretty much committed to that. And then I realized that, well, not too many people like need art to live, right? And it was kind of like, it defeated the whole purpose of like, well, if I'm going to spend my time doing one thing, it has to be impactful, right? So I kind of abandoned that, and I met a prof in civil engineering who taught me about the water problem, and that was a lot more motivating for me. So it was really about like finding that internal motivation. And then kind of once I started my PhD, I wanted my PhD to focus a lot on machine learning and AI, but I actually had to build a physical hardware instrument. And that, like, I budgeted maybe like a year for that, but it ended up taking like 80% of my PhD just to build this instrument. And that was also really stressful, like unplanned. I didn't feel qualified to build it. I lost my patience. Like actually like feeling like this is not going to work. This is a waste of time. And I guess what really helped me there was just being honest with my supervisors and being like, hey, like, I don't know where this is going. And like, I feel like, I don't know, this is a lost cause. And then them coming to me and being like, hey, like, we'll help you, we'll guide you. And then I guess just along with that, all the stress and anxiety, just learning how to take time for myself, just to exercise, to relax, not to like hold all my feelings inside. Like the PhD is a long road, and it's definitely stressful, and it can be lonely, but it doesn't have to be. And I think later on we're going to talk about community too, and community is really important for a PhD.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks for being so candid with some of the struggles during a PhD. And these are things I definitely hear about from quite a few PhD students. Like sometimes things take longer. Noorin, you said that too. Things may take longer than you expected. And that can be a hurdle, right? When you have a plan and it's feeling like it's delayed and not on track with the time, but really good to find the supports, like who's going to help you with that and who can you communicate with about that, and also the self-care. Thank you for bringing that up. That's really great. How about we switch? Roseanne, would you like to go next on that? And then Noreen can be the third. Yeah.
Definitely, yeah. So I think for me, the biggest challenge, and this has been, throughout, and you could probably pick this out even from my intro presentation there, but just the uncertainty. And I'm not really great with uncertainty in general, and not knowing kind of what the road looked like. And I still don't, I don't know what's ahead of me. And I mean, we all deal with this to a certain extent, but I think when you're doing a PhD, there are a lot of different degrees out there that set you up for a specific career, right? So med school, law school, and then even if you're doing a PhD and you choose to go into academia, or you're lucky enough to want to go into academia and you end up there becoming a professor, right? But as Kira mentioned at the start, there's less that is necessarily known about some of those alt-ac or professional options. And I mean, the truth is that the majority of careers today are not necessarily traditional in that way. You can go to law school and do something else anyway. But I think coming from having gone to teachers college and having landed right into a job teaching, then it was kind of like, okay, now I do my master's, like it doesn't map the same way. So that uncertainty was really hard. I always say it's kind of like, I'm big on analogies. It's kind of like you're driving around, you're like driving, you're driving to a party and like you have your driver's license and you know how to drive and everything's going well. And it's not so much that you don't have a map, because like maybe you have a GPS that you can pull out if you need to, but it's more like you don't even know where the party is. You're just kind of driving around. You're like, I'm looking for this party, and you're just kind of looking for road signs, hoping someone's going to call you and tell you where it is. And I'm not really sure where this analogy is going, but I guess the point is that it's kind of in your hands. There isn't necessarily one specific end goal. Maybe you're driving around and then you just kind of, maybe stop, get some food, and then you're like, oh, I'm going to make my own party. Maybe there's multiple parties. I don't know. But there's not necessarily one specific end goal. I ended up as a trainer. I did not think I was going to be in marketing, and I have no idea, where I'll be next year. So a lot of it is learning to work through that uncertainty for me. There's not necessarily a specific end goal that aligns with the degree, and there's definitely not a time limit on how soon you need to get there either.
I love that analogy. I think I'm going to start using that, Roseanne, if I can borrow it.
Absolutely. Please do.
I think this is the thing with career planning, right? Is that there probably are multiple parties, And if you notice the one road sign, you'll end up at that party. And if you notice the other road sign, you end up at the other one. And they could all be great parties, right? This is the thing, is that all roads like might lead to a really cool option that might be a good fit. I love that. But the uncertainty is it's such a big thing. And I don't think anybody loves uncertainty. Most people don't love it. And so I think this is a thing in general, something we are approaching in career counseling is really helping people build that resilience for uncertainty, because I think this is just going to be a given in today's labor market. It's gone are the days where you're going to be in the same job from when you graduate to when you retire, which would have been maybe my parents' generation, situation, but that's not happening anymore. So yeah, getting comfortable with that, it requires some work. So thanks for sharing that analogy. I love it. Noreen, would you like to go next?
Absolutely. There were lots of challenges on my road. How long do you have? I won't go through all of them and bore you guys to death, but as I was listening to you guys talk, I love the party analogy too. Might have to borrow that one too. It dawned on me that the shift, because I also struggled with, first of all, my PhD's it took me double the amount of time that I wanted it to take. And yes, I did a lot of other things along the way, but that idea of got to finish this by this timeline and do this, that pressure is part of what just sucks the joy out of the process. And so to speak to Roseanne's kind of analogy about the party is the big turning point for me was realizing this is the party. Going through it is the party. And going through the things that you set up to do and you're still deriving joy from it was the thing that kind of helped me stay motivated, even though I wasn't meeting my timelines that I had initially planned, and allowed me to sort of pivot when I faced challenges. And one of the challenges that kind of early on, or I should say just as I was nearing the point where I could start developing a career, when I was ABD, basically had finished my comprehensive exams and whatever else, the thought occurred to me, okay, I've TA'd for 20 courses, 30 courses now, but how do you go from being a TA to actually teaching a course? How does that happen? And so, one of the things that really kind of struck me as a brick wall in terms of a challenge was the lack of experience, right? And I find myself to be a fairly, I'm fine speaking in front of audiences and stuff, but the idea of teaching a whole course was incredibly intimidating to me. And I was like, how do I make that jump? And so one of the things that I tried to do to sort of pivot towards that was realizing, okay, I have a lack of that kind of experience. And then every course I TA'd for, I asked the prof, can I do a guest lecture every single time? And that was the thing that first let me get my feet wet in terms of, feeling out this possible profession for myself. And also, getting my footing in what kind of pedagogy I was going to subscribe to, what kind of instructor I was going to be, what kind of mentor I was going to be to students. So getting that early experience, and it can be intimidating to even do a guest lecture. It's one lecture, but you've got the 200, 300 faces staring at you, you're like, oh my God, I've never done this before. But, kind of pushing myself to do that was one way I overcame that wall of lack of experience. And of course, then, asking for the feedback, asking the profs and asking the students, can you give me some feedback? How do I improve for next time? And that was one thing that really helped me to sort of overcome that fear of the lack of experience. The other, challenge that comes to mind, and I hate to bring it up because it's sort of crass, but money was hard for me. I didn't have any financial support. And so, I was accumulating OSAP this whole time, and I'm thinking, oh my God, what is my situation going to be by the time I'm done? And, I took it in stride. I realized, and I liked what Jason brought up earlier, the whole idea of balance, right? Finding that balance in not just, what you're doing right now, but what's best for your mental health. Yes, I could power through and, finish this in 6 years or 5 years or whatever, or I can take a moment, spread it out, switch to part-time, which is what I ended up doing. I didn't stay full-time the whole time. I switched to part-time halfway through, and I took my time and I worked on my business and I worked on my PhD, and I said, okay, I'm just not going to finish in the timeline I thought, and I accepted that. And I think the journey unfolded as it was meant to, and the best way that it could have for me, by taking that moment to stop letting the narrative of what should be hold me back, and instead go with what is and make the best of it in so many ways. So that was a sort of second big brick wall, the financial thing. And then the other thing I was going to throw out there, especially, as this pandemic year is upon us, is, I lived far from campus. I did not live close to campus. And so it was really hard for me to get involved in graduate activities and be part of the things that were going on. So I did have to make that extra effort to sort of keep in touch with peers and colleagues and reach out and make other plans to network and do things on my own time that worked for me. So, the living far from campus, you don't think of it as being a problem because people commute, it's a it's a way of life these days. But you know, realizing that that was a sort of like an impediment to what could be, I had to find other ways to navigate around that. And you know, motivating myself through that was hard, but I'm thankful I was able to do it.
Oh, great. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's such a really helpful reminder of enjoy the journey. There is so much pressure to get things done at this time and be at this point in your life at this time and so on. And just recognizing that, you know, life doesn't begin when you graduate or when you start this job or when you have this milestone. It's now, and enjoying the journey too. So important. Such a great reminder. Thank you. And some very real challenges. So yeah, I think in this pandemic year, maybe the commuting is not, everyone's sort of doing these virtual things. So participating online in something maybe is easier for some people, but yeah, very, very good point for when things are in person. So thank you. I think this is my last sort of set question before we go into the audience question. So the community question, what resources did you tap into? What did you find helpful in charting your career path, whether it was mentors or other resources? And some of you maybe touched a little wee bit on this, and maybe we can, now I've forgotten what order we've gone in, but you know what, how about Roseanne, do you want to start with this one? And then maybe we'll go, yeah, we'll sure. Go Roseanne, Noreen, Jason, something like that. Okay.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. So resources, I think everyone's probably going to say, you know, having a network is super, super important for anything. I think in the pandemic times, even more so, because we can very, very easily just become secluded, and you're trying, you know, even working online instead of working next to someone or next to someone's office, you can get really used to just trying to tackle through puzzles and problems yourself. At least I'm like that. I'm pretty introverted, so I try to, you know, figure something out. You know, 2 hours later, I'm like, I guess I'll ask someone, and they, you know, help you or inspire you instantly. So I think on that topic of resources and networking, you know, feel free to reach out to people. Don't be afraid to start to create that network. I don't think it's ever really too early. A few of the things I did, I definitely incorporated a lot of the resources from the Center for Career Action. I actually worked there for a couple of years, worked with the advisors, were great. There are a lot of community networks you can probably join as well. I know in KW there's like the Chamber of Young Professionals. There are also academic associations for your respective domains. You'll be able to find something, you know, just look on LinkedIn, Twitter, all those different things, just to connect with people in your field. I think overall, I just started at the end of my PhD. And even now at D2L to just try to do a ton of networking. So I would go through websites of potential companies that were interesting, potential roles, looking on LinkedIn, and, you know, emailing people I knew or had a connection with, or messaging them on LinkedIn and just asking to learn more about their role. You know, you don't need to make it seem like you are trying to get something from them. Just, you know, express interest in learning more about their role. And had a lot of like little coffees or chats. Some of the time I found out that the role was not at all what I thought it was going to be. And then that kind of, you know, I'm really good at figuring out what I don't want to do, and which parties I don't want to go to, that I can tell right away. So sometimes that happens as well. And then to Noreen's point, I also, you know, did a lot of different jobs. I taught in the French department. I taught at Conestoga College. I worked for the Center for Career Action in 2 different roles. I did a lot of tutoring on the side. I had taught previously. So I think this is going to sound really cheesy, but use yourself as a resource, you know, trial and error, what you like, what you don't like. The other thing I wanted to say on that note was, as odd as it sounds, it was always very useful for me to sit down and work on my career documents, because, you know, every so often when you go to update your CV, then, you know, you naturally find things like, oh, I forgot I did that. I really enjoyed that. Why am I not doing that anymore? And then you're thinking about that pathway. Working on your teaching portfolio or your academic like dossier always kind of, you know, it can re-energize you, and then you enjoy writing about certain skills or qualities you possess, and you kind of realize what you want to pursue. So I would say, you know, networking to see kind of what you like and what you don't like, but also kind of reflecting, I guess, a little bit of that metacognition piece. I find even now when I go to do that, it kind of re-energizes me. I'm like, oh, I forgot about these different things. And then especially if you're just like getting rejections and stuff, when you like work on your thing, you're like, okay, like my portfolio looks okay. Like it's not so bad. I've done some things. So that can help as well.
That's great. I like that. Use yourself as a resource. Like the self-reflection, it's so helpful, right? To remind yourself of like, what do you enjoy? What energizes you? And keeping, as I think grad students get so busy that it's hard to find the time to stop and pause and think about these things. So thanks. Those are all really great tips. And the networking, those coffee chats, these can all still happen virtually, right? I know so many grad students who are doing those networking coffee chats virtually on Zoom, asking for someone for 20, 30 minutes of their time. And I'd love to learn more about your role. Do you have time for a 20-minute Zoom call? And you can still do them virtually. So that's great. Noreen, do you want to go next on the community piece, the resources and so on?
Sure. First, I'll say I agree with everything that Roseanne said. Like I will try my best not to be repetitive because it's very similar. Like the idea of just networking and putting yourself out there is such an important step because honestly, when I reflect back on where I've gotten jobs from and where my positions, my favorite positions have come from, the most formative positions I've had, a lot of them have been, you know, somebody who knew me from something else and recommended me for something because they knew I'd be the perfect fit. And, you know, just people knowing you and what your reputation is can be so important. And, you know, I'm a hard worker and I assume everyone who is going to do a PhD is a hard worker. And so when you have that reputation and people know that, they're eager to put you up for things and to put their name on the line to put you out there. And it just comes back tenfold when you have that network and you're all working together to do that. The other thing that I was going to add to, you know, kind of build on this idea is that, you know, as I was choosing, I shouldn't say choosing because that makes it sound like such an active process, but as I was encountering different, you know, instructors and professors and colleagues and everybody that I've encountered on my journey, I really tried to take notice of whose paths sort of aligned with where I saw my path going. And those are the people that I tended to gravitate towards the most because, well, first of all, I respected them and got along with them in that sense, but also because I realized that, you know, their journeys were likely going to be very similar to mine, and just knowing what they've been through and going through, or having the ability to just send someone a text and say, hi, I've got this situation, or, you know, what do you think about this? And having people, just having a kind of tribe behind you that you can, you know, shoot a question to, or I'm stuck in this position. I have this case with a student. What do I do? You know, every new thing that comes up, you have like an army of people behind you that have had similar experiences and can offer some insight. And that to me has been so helpful, especially as I've now like started my career. And, you know, I know there are people who have tons more experience than I do. And so I try to capitalize on that and draw from their things instead of sort of reinventing the wheel and trying to figure it out on my own. And that's exactly what Roseanne said, like that oftentimes, especially now, we can be a very isolating endeavor in academia where you sort of feel like you have to do it by yourself. But like academia is like I don't know, an age-old institution, like it's been around forever and people have figured it out. And there are things that you can take from others and, you know, use them as resources to build for yourself. And there are so many colleagues that I see as my own mentors. And now I see myself mentoring younger students. And it's this beautiful cycle of learning and love. Like, it's just awesome, not to sound too hippy dippy, but, you know, like I just respect that aspect of academia that everyone, you know, when I was younger, I honestly felt like I was bothering my profs by asking them questions, but I've realized that that's what we're here for. Like, bother people, like please bother people, bother them nicely, of course. But you know, when you're in a network with people and you're giving and you're taking, it's a beautiful thing. And it works really well when people are in it for that genuine purpose of helping each other and, you know, all of us succeeding together.
That's great. Yes, the give and take, that's a great reminder. That is what networking is, and role, like having role models or mentors who can support you, but also that's, you know, the give and take is important to remember too. I think that that's beautiful, lovely. Not too hippy dippy in my opinion, but actually, since we're on this topic of networking and you said letting people know your reputation, there was one question that was pre-submitted ahead of time where people were wondering how you got your sessional position. Was it through networking? Would you be able to touch on that just briefly before Jason answers this question?
Absolutely.
On community? Yeah.
Absolutely. So my first sessional position was for classical sociological theory, which students hate this course. They cringe when they have to take it. It has a reputation of being a tough course. It's a mandatory course. They have to take it. And so the way I got my first sessional position was, first, I had TA'd for this course for years. I love theory. One of my comprehensive exams was in theory. I'm one of these people, like, not to put the nerd label like Roseanne did, but I thrive on theory. I love finding these explanations for social realities that, you know, demystify all the things that don't make sense to us about our world. And I feel like that's what theory does. And so because I enjoyed it, I gravitated towards it as a TA. I requested that professor to let me do guest lectures, and I did guest lectures for years. Every term I helped with the course, I did a different guest lecture. So by the time that prof retired, and he had been teaching it for 20 years or plus, I don't even know, he had been the only prof teaching it. He was happy to sort of hand it over to me because he had faith in me to deliver it in a justified way and do it justice. So that was how I got my first sessional position. It was a very smooth transition from being a TA for it, guest lecturing for it, and then feeling the confidence enough to deliver it. And, you know, not to toot my own horn, but like, honestly, like the feedback I've gotten from students, they honestly say things to me like, I've avoided this course for 2 years, but I'm so glad that, you know, I took it with you because you've made me enjoy it, and your enthusiasm for it helps to translate to my enthusiasm. So that was one of the ways that I got involved in sessional positions, just kind of putting myself out there, especially with guest lectures and getting my bearings, I suppose.
Sounds good. Great tip. Thank you. And Jason, how about you in terms of resources or mentors? Tell us a little bit about the sense of community you were going to mention.
There's a lot of great value there and good experiences. I guess I'll talk a little bit my personal experience. And like, I joined the Writing Center. They were very valuable to me, updating my CV, writing my insert grant. I also joined Velocity Science, which is now Concept. I spent a lot of time there and got to know the group there. And that was really helpful, just to spend time with other entrepreneurs, learn through osmosis, just being around other people like that. I would hang out with my lab members, and then just really I can't really say anything specific other than like abundantly agree with Rosanne and Noorin about like your network is so important. And like there's this really cliche saying that your network is your net worth, and it's kind of like, I don't know, obviously there's more to life than just a net worth financial number, but there is some truth in that, and like opportunities come through your network. So that's all I'll have to say, just brief.
That's great. No, thank you so much. And I'm looking at the time and going, wow, there's still so much to cover. I want to make sure that we have 2 live questions that have come in through the Q&A, and then I still have a list of questions that came ahead of time, and I want to make sure we answer them all. But I'm seeing that some of these questions are not necessarily for every panelist, so maybe we'll be able to touch on them really quickly. Maybe we'll go to the Q&A right here on Zoom. Someone who says, I've never heard of MyTax industrial postdoc position, was wondering if Jason could talk more about it. Would that be possible, Jason? Could you mention just briefly what that industrial postdoc and MyTax funded postdoc, what that looks like?
Absolutely, yeah. So there's really 3 parties that are involved in a MyTax industrial postdoc, and I'm not a MyTax representative, so look up yourself. But essentially, you have an industrial partner. So it can be a startup company or some larger company, and you have the student, and then you have the university and the academic professor. And essentially, the student does research at the university, and but gets to be involved with the day-to-day operations and research for the startup. So the startup essentially gives MyTax some funding. MyTax matches that, or sometimes gives more, gives that to the university, and then that funding is used to pay the student. So that's MyTax Industrial Postdoc 101. I'm happy to connect in more detail. You can always, like, best way to contact me is on LinkedIn for anyone who wants to chat more about that or anything else.
Thanks, Jason. That's great. There's another question in the Q&A about during your studies, did you feel at any point there were skills that you wanted to develop, but maybe that weren't being directly addressed in the academic setting? And if so, how did you go about developing those skills? So I know, like, for example, Jason, you talked about going to the Writing Communication Center to develop the writing skills. I guess this question is more about anything that wasn't addressed that you maybe, did you go elsewhere for certain skills? Would anyone like to take that? I see Roseanne and Noorin nodding heads. Noorin, do you have a comment on that, or?
Sure, mine's a really quick little tidbit. Because I only did a one-year master's that was course-based, when I got to my PhD, especially the defense part, the dissertation defense and proposal defense, I had no idea what it involved and entailed. I was so freaked out. I remember how much anxiety I had about it, how to defend a proposal, how to defend a dissertation, what am I supposed to do? And the thing that kind of, drew me in was attending other people. So I tried to see what other people were doing, and there's no like onus, nobody has to go to other people's defenses, but going is what helped me, give me confidence in what I needed to do. So that's one skill that they don't like directly teach you like how to do that, but there are ways to figure out how to do it. So that's one thing that comes to mind with this question.
Great. Roseanne, you were nodding your head. Was there something also you wanted to add?
Yeah, I have a couple of concrete examples. So one that maybe for me personally was more of a refresher because I did go to Teachers College, but I did the through the Center for Teaching Excellence, I did the Fundamentals in University Teaching certificate, and then I also did specific to languages, I did the certificate in university language teaching. So I know, like I said, for me, it was more of a refresher, but for some of my colleagues who didn't go to Teachers College, you don't necessarily get a background in pedagogy and classroom management and things like that. So there's a combination of workshops, and then you do micro teaching and observations. You get feedback on your teaching. So really, really great for anyone wanting to brush up on any of the teaching part. And then second thing, for me, this was kind of similar to Noreen. I actually thought she was going to say this, but in the months leading up to my thesis defense, I was like, I am not afraid of public speaking, but I don't feel like I'm a very professional public speaker. I feel like I'm a very storytelling and analogy public speaker. So I actually I audited one of Waterloo's speech comm courses. I can't think of the number, but it's speech comm 2 something, and it was like just introduction to public speaking. So I audited that, and that was super fun. I'm really big on professional development, so anything like that where you start to think, I feel like I could hone in on my public speaking. I'm sure there's a course for it. If not, there's an online course for it, and those are going to be some of the most transferable skills, because I have a whole page now on my CV that's just like professional development with all those different workshops and courses. So just kind of do a little bit of Googling, and you can probably find something.
Great, thanks. Jason, did you want to add anything? Or
Just that, Roseanne, I love that you audited that course. I think that shows a lot of initiative. I audited a course in my PhD too. It was a language course, just because I was curious, and my supervisor gave me permission. But I would recommend that to all PhDs too. Is like you have a wealth of knowledge and world-class experts who are teaching these topics. So explore a little bit.
yeah, so many opportunities at the university. Cool. This is why I love working at a university. All right, I'm realizing I have a lot of questions, but I think many of them have been sort of answered. There were quite a few questions, people who were curious for the entrepreneurs in our panel about how did you start your own company and how do you balance your work and startup? And I know both of you sort of touched on the how you started it and the why, but maybe the balance, because right now you're both still, you're kind of in several roles. So if you want to talk about balance, that'd be great. Maybe Jason, do you start to start?
I don't have an answer because it's extremely difficult. It's like I haven't quite figured it out, to be honest. Like it's kind of a tug of war. What I managed to pull off is that my thesis and postdoc work are directly related to the startup activity. And so I'm very, very fortunate. Part of that was by design, part of that was by, I guess, Luke, like that I happened to work out. But the more you can align those two, the less stress it'll be. At least that was my experience. So yeah, and be transparent with your supervisors too. Like my supervisor knows what I'm up to. Sometimes I don't meet all the deadlines, I try my best, right? It's kind of like, it's a bit of a negotiation too. So those are just general thoughts, but like, if someone figures it out, let me know. So.
Sounds good. I know. I think this is balance, finding balance in one's life of all the things that matter, because it's never an easy thing. So Noreen, do you have any tips on that? How's that working for you, balancing between the sessional work and your love of language activities?
Yeah. It's tough, and same with Jason. I like, if you figure out some secret tips, let me know, because there are times where I'm like, am I like slowly like killing myself by doing this? Like, you just feel those moments of like, oh God, I need to catch my breath, but I can't because there's so much. My to-do list just keeps growing. I check one thing off, 5 new things come on, and it's like, and unfortunately, I shouldn't say unfortunately, but my experience is that like my love of language program is not at all in line with what I do at the university or any of the things that I teach or, I have research. So it is very much two separate endeavors for me, and balance is really tough. One sort of thing that I've learned to do that's helped me is, again, I think this speaks to some themes we've already touched on is, I know there's this academic tendency to want to do things yourself and because you tend to do them the way you want them done, right? The right way. But, part of my journey has been learning to sort of let go and, give tasks to others and trust others and bring them in on the process, because you can't do everything by yourself. And, I've been told by some experts and other colleagues that at some point in my career, I'm going to end up having to choose between the university path versus, building love of language. And that's a thing that really scares me, because they're like my babies, both of them. Love of language I built from scratch. Like, this is a curriculum I developed from my insides, right? And then whereas, teaching for the university has been my dream. So I really would like to find a way to continue both of these paths. And I think the only way that's possible is learning to sort of like delegate and have a team behind you that can help you to do things when you can't. So that's one of the things that's helping me to learn how to balance, even though I wouldn't say that I have achieved balance quite yet. So come back to me in a few years, I think.
Sorry, go ahead, Jason.
Oh, no, I just like, Noorin, I think you articulated better than what I was trying to say. Is like the idea if you can't do it alone, and then like, well, you might be able to, but a perilous journey, right? So like I found a co-founder, and she has her PhD in microbiology, and she's also doing a postdoc, and so we're kind of on the same page there, right? And my supervisor is aware of what I'm doing, and he's supporting that activity. So yeah, like get the support and build a team.
Thanks, Jason. Great. Noreen, you kind of opened a segue there to one of the questions that came up in a variety of different ways was sort of, how did you in the first place choose between industry and academia? And Noreen, it sounds like you like the best of both worlds and are hoping to keep in that, both. How about Roseanne? And then we'll go to Jason. Now, like, I know you shared a lot of like it was trial and error, testing out different things. And that's really, I think we heard your career story. I feel like we got a little bit of an answer on that, but if you want to go into anything more specific, Roseanne, yeah.
So the short answer is I didn't really, kind of same as Noreen. I sort of, towards the end of my PhD, I was applying for some academic jobs. I was applying for some industry jobs. I was applying for some government jobs. I kind of had maybe 3 or 4 larger buckets of things that, as long as I found something within utilizing my skills that I felt like I would be happy at least to start. And then so I sort of just fell into industry, to be perfectly honest. And then from where I landed at D2L, I've kind of been able to cultivate more of a role that I'm happier with. But at the same time, I kind of feel like I'm similar to Noreen in that I don't know that I'm ever going to be like, oh, I've made a choice, I'm doing one thing and nothing else. Because I mean, I do, sometimes teach French on the side. I also have a part-time job where I'm doing ESL assessments and teaching more French. Sometimes I'll go present at an academic conference or write different articles. I mean, it's only been 2 years since I graduated, so I still feel kind of in that realm, and I do have some of those networks still. So I kind of didn't really choose. I'm doing industry and I like it. I'm still doing academic things. I feel like if it was the opposite, I probably would too, because I just I like to keep my options open. Again, come back to me in a few years. That might not be the case.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great. That's great to know. And just curious, because that is one question. When did you start applying for those government jobs and industry jobs and academic jobs? What was your timeline in your final year of your PhD? Because people were wondering, when should you apply for industry and or academic?
I would say, so I mean, typically for academic jobs, you're possibly going to see postings come out a year prior. So my thesis defense was April 2018. So if I had wanted to apply, like if I knew I wanted to apply for teaching jobs for September 2018, I probably would have been applying in the fall of 2017. For that, I wasn't really sure. So personally, I did most of that work in like January. So I would say the start of my last semester, because you don't know, right? You don't know how long. Like I took 4.5 years for it, but I was like, am I going to take 5? Am I going to take 6? So I think when I started the final semester, where I was like, okay, I have a date for my PhD defense. It's at the end of the semester. That January, I kind of put all my documents together and then just started putting things out. It was kind of too late to apply to most academic jobs for that year, but that was when I really did all that work. So like the start of my final semester. The semester previous was when I had started doing all the networking to kind of research and things like that.
Awesome, great. And that's typically what I see in all the fields, all across all domains and research areas, that typically the academic job market, it's applying between November and January for, a July start date. So almost 8 months in advance. And for some government jobs, that's the case too. Like some of the set government recruitment positions, it's September, October, November that they're recruiting for July start date type of thing. But anytime, for those of you who are wondering, when should you start? The networking can start in your second or third year of your PhD, or first year, why not? Jason, do you have any comments on like the choosing between academia and industry or business? Any comments on that?
Yeah, well, I guess I've always had a slant towards industry and trying to get a job and doing something practical. And like, I did an undergrad just to get a job. Then I did a master's because I was like, it sounds interesting, but I didn't like that was going to be it. And then I did the PhD and that was going to be it. And I'm doing a postdoc. So I'm probably an anomaly because like some people like plan to do a PhD when they're like 15 and they're like, that's my path, right? For me, it's kind of like I'm just going where the wind takes me, and I have a direction, and I don't want to limit myself to being in this bucket or this bucket. It's more of like, okay, that's how it's working out. My intention is to like focus as an entrepreneur and build businesses. So I don't have any ambitions to go into academia. I admire people who do, because it is a very challenging road, and I have friends who have gone through that struggle of trying to apply for those positions, and it's like, yeah, it's challenging. So my heart goes out to everyone who is. But personally, like I've been using my education to build the skills I believe I need to be a tech entrepreneur.
Great, thank you. I think I'll jump to a question that's more about not the transition after grad school. It's like during grad school. One person was asking how did you find that balance? There's a lot of pressure to publish, and all of you sounded like you were busy with other things like TAing and getting involved here and part-time tutoring, all these things. How did you find that balance? How did you balance the tips for producing journal publications during PhD studies while balancing all the other demands? So if we could do that, we only have a few minutes left, so maybe quick summary of what your thoughts are on that. I guess I didn't tell anyone to start specifically, so sorry. Noreen, would you like to start?
Sure, I'll just profess right at the get-go of this that I don't have a lot of publications. I published a little bit, but not a lot, and certainly not the amount that I'm assuming a lot of departments expect by this point, because I was so focused on teaching. But one thing that I did that sort of opened up the avenue for publishing for me is I got involved on the other end of it. So we actually started the Canadian Graduate Journal of Sociology and Criminology that in our department, and we networked with people all over the country. We had board members from all departments across the country. So that was one way I started getting involved in publishing. publishing because I first of all didn't know enough about it. So being involved in the organization of the journal and the peer editing process, that kind of opened up my eyes to how it worked. And then from there, you know, conference presentations are another way to start generating the publications, because a lot of these conferences will invite you to publish a special issue or something along those lines, that if you already have your feet wet with that presentation, then you can already kind of build a paper out of the presentation. So I unfortunately don't have like direct, you know, examples that I can give you, but, you know, being opportunistic, I guess, is the thing that helped me to sort of make my way through things, is seizing the opportunities when they came. And I definitely hope to publish more, especially because I haven't published for my dissertation yet, which is like, what was it all for? But, you know, I still have ambitions to do that.
Thanks for sharing. Roseanne, do you have any tips on that balance?
Yeah, I would say maybe going back to a lot of what we were saying about collaborating. So I totally agree with Noreen. I did a lot of conferences, and then sometimes they invite you to publish from there, or you can network, or just, you know, again, there's a lot of associations, so you kind of just I mean, I know I always had bookmarks on my browser, so like all the main journals and then all of the main like HR job postings, and I would just, you know, every however often kind of just go through and be like, is there something I want to do? And you just kind of make it like into a routine, like brushing your teeth. But I think collaborating, I know, you know, either working with your thesis advisor or with other members of your department, you know, who know that, just kind of put it out there that you're interested in such and such. And then, you know, there's a professor who's working on something that you're close with, they might be able to reach out to you and be like, oh, could you help me to, you know, co-edit this? Or even I did this actually a lot with my fellow PhD colleagues. We were in completely different domains, but I did a lot of collaborating just because we all knew that we were kind of working towards the same goal. So just, you know, someone would be like, hey, I'm working on such and such, do you think there's something we can do together? So kind of starting with collaborating, but I don't really have a good answer either as far as balance. I will actually say, because this might be beneficial, that I probably didn't have a good balance, and I would encourage everyone to prioritize their mental health more than I did during the PhD. I'm very like work hard, play hard, but I think there is, you know, something to be said for taking more breaks and things like that.
Thanks. That's a really good reminder, Roseanne. And yeah, I know there is a lot of pressure on grad students. So balancing that, it's hard, and your health is important, because doing all this hard work and all the things that our panelists have talked about, the networking, the getting involved in opportunities, the reflecting, it takes strength and energy. You need to be well to do that. So yeah, Jason, any tips on the publishing? I know you access the Writing and Communication Center a lot. Anything to add?
Yeah, I guess one of the things that I learned that was really helpful is that different faculties, like different domains of science or research, have different kind of ways of publishing, and the timelines are much different. So like arts versus engineering versus science versus computer science. And just understanding what one of those you're in, or maybe another one, will kind of be helpful. Like I had a very computer science engineering focus, which like leans itself to quicker, easier publications. And then I would say also choose the right venue. That was something like I chose some ambitious venues for my water research, and they got slammed, they got rejected. And it was a good learning experience, but it was kind of like, okay, this was not the appropriate conference or journal. And a lot of that for me came from my academic supervisors and lab mates. So that just goes back to Noorin and Roseanne's point about collaborate and just work with your colleagues.
Great. Yeah, thanks. Use your community. That's great. Thank you. I'm looking at the list of questions, and I feel like we've answered most of them through your stories. There were quite a few about what resources you use to start your own business, to convert research to your business, and pitch competitions, hackathon money, prize money, concept, which used to be called Velocity on our campus, could be really helpful. So I'm just going to repeat some of the things that already came up. Maybe some things that this is interesting. It could also be challenging for our panelists to answer. Maybe since you're not on the recruiting side of things, but there is a question of like, is a PhD an advantage in getting a job in industry? And maybe Roseanne can touch on that, because you work in industry, and maybe you can see if, I don't know if D2L hires a lot of PhD grads, if you have a quick comment on that.
I can definitely speak to that. And I feel like it's yes and no. So I feel like the PhD itself, not necessarily. Like, to be perfectly honest, someone's not gonna look at your CV and say, oh, like master's and PhD, like, whoa, like that doesn't have the same weight in industry as it would in, if you're reading an academic posting, it says, must have PhD or must be ABD. So it doesn't have the same weight. So if you're, I wouldn't recommend, doing a PhD just because you think it's going to look better for an industry job. That being said, having the PhD is of course an advantage because of all the skills you can bring to it. So the fact that I am working at D2L and then now I can say, oh, in my PhD, we, did such and such, I learned how to do research. So many of those skills are going to be beneficial. But as far as kind of like credential dropping, not really, because I find a lot of the people that there are, don't get me wrong, there are a lot of people with PhDs at D2L, but I find a lot of it is more experience based. So people might have, a couple degrees and then they kind of got in early and they're building that experience. So they're building that network. So that's something that I almost felt like I was a little bit behind, to be perfectly honest, when I started, because I was like, now I'm in marketing. I don't know anything about marketing, and kind of starting to build my network that way. It's a quick answer.
But I think that touches on a little bit of what you said earlier too. It's all about how do you talk about your skills? Like, have you identified your transferable skills as a PhD student, and can you talk about it so that the employer gets like, aha, this is how it's going to be of value? And I can speak to that a little bit because at the Center for Career Action, we talk to a lot of employers, a lot of recruiters, and really people in industry are hiring for skills. It's not so much credentials. So I think this touches on another question that came in about if you're returning to school for a PhD after several years of work experience, how do you leverage that? I mean, employers are looking for evidence of how have you used your skills. So think about that on your resume for industry. Are you showing how you've used your skills and what you've accomplished with that? I hope I've touched on everything. There's lots of questions, but I think they were all kind of touched on in your stories. I'm wondering, before I thank our panelists for their time today, is there anything we didn't get to talk about that you like, maybe it didn't come up in one of the questions, something you feel in your transition from grad school to what you're doing now that you wish you had shared that you haven't shared yet because I didn't ask the right question? Anything you'd like to add before we wrap up? And any of the panelists can take this if there's anything that comes to mind.
I'll go first, I guess.
Roseanne.
I just really would like to underline what Kira just said, because we kind of slid it in there about learning how to talk about your PhD. She articulated very well what I was trying to say, that like having a PhD is amazing, but if you're kind of outside, the minute you break outside of what Noorin called like that academic bubble, you need to learn to talk about it a little bit differently, because it's not going to have the same weight of just like, oh, I have a PhD. So you need to just definitely learning to talk about your PhD for different audiences. And then also the mental health thing again. Take care of your mental health. Do not get an eye twitch. Do not get overcaffeinated. We did that for you so that you don't have to do these things. That's what I would leave it on.
Thanks, Roseanne. Anyone, Jason or Noreen, would you like to, any final thoughts or reflections on your transition?
I think, Roseanne, you said it great. I'm happy to leave it there.
Thanks, Jason.
All I was going to say was, in addition to just kind of learning how to talk about your PhD, learn how to talk about your career in general, right? Have that like 3-minute pitch or whatever it is that you can just put it out there. What have your major accomplishments and highlights been? I think that, when people meet you and you can kind of isolate it down to the main elements, that it helps them to understand what it is that you've done all these years, especially in school. So I think just being able to communicate that in a really clear way is a good skill to have.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, everyone. It's 1:31, so this kind of brings us to the end of our panel today. And I find time just flew because I loved hearing our panelists' stories and their experiences. I hope the audience has enjoyed this as well. So I want to thank Roseanne and Noorin and Jason for their time and for their candid storytelling and sharing. I really appreciated it. And all the resources that you shared, from like resources on campus to all the ideas of networking and talking to alumni and gathering those ideas. So great. And of course, remember, please, that the Center for Career Action is here for you. Those of you in the audience who are planning careers and figuring out how to network and not quite sure how to do that, we're here to support you on all of those things that were talked about today. I'd also like to thank my colleagues at Alumni Alumni Relations and the GSPA who are on the Zoom webinar and supporting tech-wise and supported with all the logistics and planning. And so thanks to our panelists. Wish we could give you all a round of applause right now, and then wish you all the best for the upcoming years. I know you said check in with me in a few years. Maybe we can. Maybe we'll do that and see how things are going, and wish you all the best with things you have on the go, and embracing that uncertainty too, and seeing where the path leads. I look forward to seeing that for all three of you. So thank you everyone for joining us, and lovely to speak with you, and yeah, have a good rest of the day. Good weekend, everyone.